Why was no one looking at her? At the long steel table under the humming fluorescent lights, every eye stayed fixed on the map. Not one of them turned her way. She shifted slightly, the rough fabric of the borrowed jacket scratching against her neck, but still, silence. The men leaned forward, trading clipped words about routes, risks, and resources. She sat at the far end, pen motionless, and wondered if they even remembered she was there. That silence cut deeper than any insult. She wasn't new, she wasn't fragile, but she knew why they avoided her gaze. There had been the mission 3 weeks earlier, the one no one talked about anymore, the one she had walked out of alone. Her hands clenched in her lap, nails pressing into her palms. They didn't see it, but they felt it. The weight of her survival pressed against their shoulders, and yet none of them dared to ask. The colonel's voice cracked through the still air. 2 hours. If we can't intercept the convoy by then, it disappears into the hills. He stabbed the map with his finger. We're down to one option, a cut through here, but it's suicide unless someone gets eyes on the ridge first. A pause, uneasy shuffling of boots, the sound of throats clearing, no volunteers. That's when she spoke, quiet, firm, I'll go. Every head finally turned. The colonel's jaw tightened. He didn't say no, but his silence carried all the protest he couldn't voice in front of the others. She saw it, read it, and stood anyway. The chair scraped against the floor, echoing like a verdict. Her body moved before her heart caught up, and for a flicker of a second she saw something new in their eyes. Not trust, not faith, just the sharp edge of curiosity. Would she fail again or vanish like before? She didn't wait for permission, she just walked out. The night air cut like glass when she stepped outside. The outpost smelled of oil, dust, and lingering smoke from the burn pit. She pulled the strap of her rifle higher across her shoulder and inhaled, steadying herself. Above, the sky stretched black and endless, the stars buried under a thin veil of clouds. Her boots crunched over gravel as she crossed the yard. In the shadows by the wire fence, a younger soldier leaned against a post, helmet dangling by his side. He looked up at her with wary eyes. "You sure about this?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. The boy couldn't have been more than 20. Skin too clean, voice still carrying softness. She envied that softness. She had lost hers long ago. Finally she said, "I've walked worse ridges." It was a lie, but lies sometimes kept people breathing. The boy nodded. "If you don't come back." She cut him off with a sharp glance. "I'll come back." But even as the words left her lips, her stomach twisted. Because the last time she hadn't planned on returning alone, and she still carried the echo of footsteps that never followed hers down that mountain. The ridge waited like a question mark in the distance. Dark, jagged, its lines cutting across the horizon. Every step closer felt like a page turning, a chapter she couldn't stop reading even if she wanted to. Her breathing slowed as she moved into the brush. Dirt shifted beneath her boots, loose rocks tumbling silently down the slope. She crouched, pressing herself low, the rifle snug against her chest. The silence was heavy, broken only by her heartbeat drumming in her ears. Halfway up she froze. A sound. A soft crunch of weight against gravel, too deliberate to be an animal. She held her breath, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing. The slope lay still. But something lingered. A memory surged. Another night, another slope, men laughing low just before the ambush swallowed them all. She blinked hard, forcing the image back. That night had been chaos. This was now. Her fingers tightened around the grip. She whispered under her breath, steadying herself, "Not again. Not tonight." At the crest, the world opened wide. The valley below stretched in muted silver under the moonlight. Roads curled like veins across the earth, and somewhere down there the convoy would be moving. Her job was simple: find it, mark it, signal them. But her chest still carried the weight of something else. A name, a face, a promise she had buried but never kept. She lowered to her stomach, rifle angled forward, scope glinting faintly as she adjusted her view. Through the lens, the night came alive. Shadows deepened, distant rocks sharpened, and movement stirred along the dirt road. There it was, a faint glimmer of headlights crawling between ridges, barely visible through the dust. Her pulse kicked. She clicked her radio, voice steady but low. "Convoy spotted. Grid 47 moving northeast. You have a 10-minute window." Static crackled, then the colonel's voice answered. "Copy. Hold position. Do not engage." She nodded to no one, but even as she settled against the earth, eyes fixed on the distant lights, something gnawed at her. A memory, uninvited. The voice of her brother years ago when she first left home. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." She had laughed then, brushed it off. But now, alone on the ridge, she whispered back to the night, "I wasn't trying to prove. I was trying to make it right." The headlights grew brighter. The dust cloud thickened. She tightened her grip, muscles coiled. Yet a strange stillness swept over her. Time slowed, her breath sinking with the hum of the earth. Then movement to her left. She swung her scope sharply. A figure in the dark, too close, too silent. He wasn't one of hers. Her breath caught, her finger hovered. If she fired, the convoy below would scatter. If she hesitated, he'd end her. But he didn't fire. He just stood half-shadow, staring at her through the dark. And that's when she realized something terrifying. He wasn't aiming at her. He was signaling. To someone else. Far below, the convoy slowed. Headlights blinked twice in a strange rhythm, then cut briefly before returning. The pattern sent a chill racing through her. This wasn't just transport, it was bait. Her heart slammed. She reached for the radio, but the static surged, loud, jagged, wrong, jammed. The figure slipped back into the dark. Her hand shook against the rifle. A decision pressed against her like a blade at the throat. Stay hidden and watch them walk into the trap, or move, break orders, risk everything. Her mind split in two: duty, survival, redemption. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She thought of the last mission, the faces she left behind. She thought of the silence at the table tonight, the weight of their stares. And she thought of her brother's words, "Don't prove, just make it right." When she opened her eyes again, the answer was already burning inside her. She moved. The rocks gave way under her boots as she slid down the ridge, body low, breath sharp in her chest. Every sound seemed louder now, the scrape of metal, the hiss of dust, the pounding in her ears. Her radio stayed dead, static snarling against her efforts. The convoy loomed closer, engines growling, silhouettes of men shifting atop the vehicles. She ducked behind a boulder, chest heaving. Sweat stung her eyes. She could see them now. Not cargo, weapons. Stacks of crates under tarps, guarded by men with eyes too alert for a simple transfer. And something else, a cage. Her stomach twisted. Shadows inside moving, too small to be soldiers, too desperate. Civilians. Her pulse broke into a sprint. They weren't moving arms, they were moving lives. And she was the only one close enough to stop it. Her hand trembled as she reached for her pack, for the flare she swore she wouldn't use. She gripped it hard, metal cold against her palm. If she lit it, everything burned, her cover, her orders, her chance of walking out alive. But if she didn't, she already knew what silence would cost. She took a breath, slow and deep, and then in the black mouth of the valley she struck the flare. Red fire tore against the night, hissing, spitting sparks into the air. The valley lit like a wound, raw and screaming. The convoy halted. Shouts cracked open the silence. Guns swung in every direction, and from the ridge behind her she prayed they saw. She didn't know if reinforcements would come. She didn't know if she would survive the next 5 minutes, but she knew one thing. She would not vanish again. Not tonight. The red flame hissed in her hand, bright against the night. It painted her face in firelight, carved shadows across her cheekbones, and bled into the valley like a wound that refused to close. Shouts erupted below. Engines roared, brakes screeched, boots slammed against metal. The convoy scattered in panic, soldiers raising rifles, eyes hunting the ridge. And still she stood. The flare burned hot against her glove, every crackle searing her with a truth she could no longer bury. She had broken the silence. A rifle cracked from somewhere below. The bullet split stone inches from her knee. Chips of rock stung her skin. She dropped low, heart pounding, rolling into the cover of a jagged outcrop. The flare sputtered against the ground, still screaming red into the darkness. Her rifle came up smooth, practiced. The glass of her scope glimmered. Through it the valley sharpened, faces, helmets, the restless twitch of hands on triggers. She should have fired. A soldier's reflex, a sniper's instinct, but her breath caught when her scope brushed past the cage again. Children. Not many, 6, maybe 7. Faces pressed against steel bars, eyes wide, mouths open but no sound reaching her. Her finger froze on the trigger. The shot dissolved in her chest. She whispered under her breath, voice cracking in the wind, "What the hell are you carrying them for?" But the night had no answer, only the rush of boots below, scattering to flank her position. She rolled back against the rock, breath shallow, lungs burning. Her radio still spat static, jammed. She was alone. But not for long. A flicker of light behind her caught her eye. The ridge, movement. She spun, rifle raised, chest tightening. A silhouette broke from the brush, a familiar stance, the flash of an allied patch. Friendly, a voice hissed, low, urgent. She almost didn't believe it, but then another shape slid in behind him. 2 soldiers, reinforcements. They ducked against the rock beside her, sweat dripping from their temples, rifles raised. The older one met her eyes, face drawn hard. "You lit that flare," he demanded. She didn't flinch. "They've got civilians in the cage, kids." The younger soldier's eyes widened, his breath catching. The older one swore under his breath, raking a hand down his stubbled jaw. "Command didn't mention." "Because they didn't know," she cut in. Her voice was sharp, certain. "This isn't a transport, it's bait." The older soldier's gaze hardened. For a moment, silence pressed between them like a test. Then he nodded once. "All right, then we move careful." But careful wasn't what the valley demanded. Not anymore. Gunfire rattled across the ridge, tracers slicing through the dark. One hissed past her ear, close enough to hear the heat. She ducked lower, dragging her scope over the shifting silhouettes below. The soldiers by the convoy weren't panicked. Not anymore. They moved with purpose, discipline, covering angles, spreading wide. Whoever commanded them knew exactly what they were doing. Which meant she had already lost the advantage. She exhaled slowly, lining her scope against the cage again. One boy gripped the bars, knuckles white, face streaked with dirt. He couldn't have been older than 8. And in his eyes she saw the same thing she once saw in a mirror, fear sharpened into silence. Her throat tightened. She whispered so softly only the dirt could hear, "I see you, I won't leave you." And then she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The nearest guard by the cage dropped hard, his weapon clattering against steel. Chaos broke. Soldiers shouted, diving for cover, firing wild into the ridge. "Move," the older ally barked, shoving her shoulder. They rolled from cover, darting along jagged stone, bullets sparking against rock. Dust filled her lungs. Her boots scraped earth, legs screaming for speed. Every step hammered the same thought into her chest. Not again, not again. They ducked into a gully, panting hard. Dirt rained from above as rounds chewed the ridge's edge. The younger soldier's face was pale, hands trembling as he reloaded. "They're everywhere," he gasped. The older one snapped, "Focus." Then softer, like a father scolding a frightened son, "You breathe, you reload, you fight, nothing else." The younger one swallowed, nodding, his hands steadied. She watched them, heart twisting. Even in war, the bond between them clung stubbornly. She felt like an intruder, someone who had already lost her bond, her brothers in arms buried in silence. She turned away, forcing herself back into the scope. Her hands were steady, but her chest was. Each shot was a choice, each face a reminder. The line between necessary and unbearable blurred. The older soldier tapped her shoulder. "We can't hold here, too exposed." "Then we hit them before they hit us," she said. Her voice carried steel now. For a moment he studied her, the kind of look men gave when they didn't quite trust but couldn't afford to doubt. Then he nodded once. "Fine your call." The plan formed in whispers. She would pin their fire from the ridge. The others would circle low, cut close to the convoy, and breach the cage. It was reckless, maybe suicidal, but there was no time to wait for backup that might never come. She didn't tell them that part. She only said, "When you move, you don't stop, no matter what happens." They exchanged a glance. The younger one nodded, jaw tight. The older one gripped her shoulder briefly, firm. Not a gesture of trust, something heavier. Respect for the weight she was choosing to carry. And then they broke. Her rifle spat fire, each shot deliberate, carving chaos into the valley below. Soldiers ducked, scrambled, returned fire. But her focus wasn't on them. It was on the cage. Through the smoke and dust, she caught glimpses. The children shrinking low, flinching against steel, eyes flicking toward the flare's dying glow as if it were their last anchor. Her chest clenched. She whispered again, "Hold on." Below, her allies sprinted, shadows darting low, weaving through bursts of gunfire. She adjusted, fired, bought them seconds. Another guard dropped. Another rifle slipped from desperate hands. But the enemy was faster now, adjusting. They shifted fire away from her ridge, angling down toward the breaching pair. Her breath hitched. She couldn't cover both. She couldn't be in two places at once. Her scope trembled between the soldiers and the cage. Her allies, running headlong into fire. The children pressed against steel. Her heart split. And then she made the choice she knew she'd never forgive herself for. She left the cage. Her scope locked onto the enemy flanking left, rifles raised, sights fixed on the younger ally. She exhaled, squeezed. The shot cut him down mid-step. Another pivot, another crack, another one fell. The younger ally stumbled but kept running, alive only because she'd chosen him. Her chest burned. She whispered, voice breaking, "Please forgive me." By the time she dragged her scope back to the cage, another guard had taken her blind spot. A rifle slammed against the steel, a warning shot fired over the children's heads. They screamed now, silent no longer. Her stomach dropped. For every life saved, another was trapped, and she was too far to change it. A sudden crack split the night, louder, heavier than rifles. The cage's lock blew apart, sparks spitting from shattered steel. Her eyes widened. The older ally had reached it. Smoke curled from his shotgun, his hand gripping the cage door. He yanked it wide, shouting, "Go, run." Small bodies burst out, scrambling barefoot across dirt, sprinting into the dark. The younger soldier covered them, firing in bursts, voice raw as he urged them on. Relief washed through her so fast her hands trembled. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of small feet slapping earth, scattering into the safety of night. But then the cost came due. The older soldier staggered, a burst tearing into his side. He dropped hard, hands still clutching the cage door. Her scope found him instantly, heart splitting. The younger one screamed, "No," but kept firing, covering the retreating children. She pressed her face hard into the scope, tears blurring her vision. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. The older soldier met her gaze across the valley. His lips moved. No sound reached her, but she read it all the same. "Finish it." Her throat closed, her finger pressed the trigger, the fight raged on. But inside she broke all over again. The last of the children vanished into the brush. The younger soldier dragged his fallen comrade behind cover, his cries raw and helpless. She stayed on the ridge, rifle hot, ears ringing, chest hollow. Her flare burned itself out, leaving the valley in shadow again. Her radio crackled suddenly, alive once more. The colonel's voice cut through static, sharp and demanding. "Status report, do you copy?" She stared at the blackened flare stub in the dirt. Her hand shook as she reached for the radio. Her voice came out low, hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "They took the bait, but the cost," she stopped, breath breaking. "We've got civilians free, but we lost," her words caught. "We lost someone." The silence on the other end was heavy. Then the colonel said, softer than she expected, "Understood. Hold position, we're coming." She lowered the radio slowly, staring into the dark valley. The smoke, the dust, the scattered bodies. She had saved them, the children, maybe even her allies. But the image of the older soldiers' eyes, the silent command in them, seared deeper than the flare's fire ever could. For the second time in her life, she carried a loss she couldn't share. And still, she hadn't told them everything. Not yet. What do you tell men who expect only clean answers? She sat alone on the ridge as dawn crept in slow, gray strokes. The smoke had thinned, drifting low over the valley, curling around the lifeless metal husks of trucks. The flare was ash now, cold against the dirt, and the radio, silent again, rested heavy in her lap. The younger soldier was still down below. She'd watched him through her scope, dragging, pleading, pressing cloth against the older one's wound long after the body had gone still. He hadn't stopped until exhaustion broke him. Even then, his shoulders heaved, hands shaking against the blood-soaked ground. She had wanted to go down, to help, to say something that could break the weight inside his chest, but her legs had refused to move. Maybe it was shame, maybe fear, or maybe it was because she recognized that look, the raw, stunned ache of being left behind. It wasn't something words could heal. She knew she had lived it. The horizon cracked pale. A breeze carried the stench of burnt oil and iron. She closed her eyes, head leaning back against cold stone, and let it pierce through her ribs. Memories surfaced, uninvited. The last mission. The night that swallowed her team whole. She had never told them, never told anyone, that she had seen it coming. The wires strung across the path, the shadows shifting wrong. She had felt it in her bones before the blast ripped open the earth. But she hadn't spoken. She had doubted her own eyes. She had hesitated. And in that heartbeat of silence, men who trusted her vanished in fire. When she crawled out from the dirt, ears ringing, lungs raw with smoke, only she remained. The silence after was louder than the blast itself. Since then, she had carried that silence like a second skin. And now, watching the younger soldier stumble beneath grief, she felt it again, that hollow weight pressing her to the ground. The radio crackled once more. Voices broke through, clipped, distorted. Reinforcements finally threading through the valley. Engines rumbled closer. Orders barked. The storm of noise wrapped around her, demanding her return. But still she stayed seated, hands limp in her lap. Because she knew they would ask questions, and she wasn't sure if she had the strength to lie again. By the time she descended the ridge, the sun had cracked gold across the peaks. Dust plumes rose as armored vehicles crawled into the valley. Soldiers spread out, disciplined lines cutting through smoke. The younger one sat in the dirt, back against the cage, rifle across his knees. His face was pale, hollowed, eyes fixed on the older soldier's still body covered with a tarp. He didn't move when she approached. She lowered herself beside him, knees brushing dirt. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the crack of boots and clipped orders filled the space. Finally, he said, voice hoarse, "He told me I'd make it home," said it like he believed it. She turned her gaze toward the tarp, her chest tightening. He did believe it. The boy's jaw clenched, his breath shaking. Then why him, why not me? Her throat burned. She wanted to tell him the truth, that survival never followed reason, that sometimes the world just picked its victims without logic, without mercy. but the words stayed locked, because she remembered the same question breaking from her lips once, and no answer had ever soothed it. Instead, she whispered, "Because he chose you." The boy turned sharply, eyes wet, face twisting between anger and grief. For a second she thought he would shout, accuse her, curse the unfairness. But instead he dropped his gaze, his shoulders shaking. She let him grieve, because she understood. And silently she grieved too. The colonel arrived with the convoy, his face carved from stone. He scanned the scene, eyes catching on the cage, the children huddled together under blankets offered by medics. Then his gaze slid to her. "You broke orders," he said flatly. Her jaw tightened, she stayed silent. "You compromised the ridge, you revealed position." He stepped closer, voice low, "But you also saved them." His eyes cut toward the children. "And cost us one of ours." The weight of his stare pressed against her, but she didn't flinch. "I'll carry it," she said simply. He studied her, his silence sharp. Then he turned away, barking for reports, directing cleanup. He left her standing in dust, the words still burning on her tongue. "I'll carry it." She whispered it again, softer this time, as if reminding herself. But part of her wondered how much weight one body could bear before it broke. Hours later, the valley emptied. Trucks rolled out, engines heavy with burden. The younger soldier sat in the back of one, head bowed, helmet loose in his lap. The tarp lay folded at his side, silent testament to what they carried home. She remained behind, perched on the ridge again, scanning the emptiness with tired eyes. She should have gone, should have boarded the truck with them, but something held her there. Her gaze drifted back to the road the enemy convoy had taken, the dust trails disappearing into the mountains. There was no end to it, just more shadows, more traps, more children in cages waiting to be found. And she couldn't shake the image of the man who had stood beside her in the dark, signaling before the convoy's headlights blinked their message. He hadn't fired at her. He'd vanished, deliberate, confident, like he knew she'd seen enough to understand. A chill threaded her spine. This wasn't over. She pulled her knees closer to her chest, resting her chin against them. The silence pressed close again, heavy, relentless. But this time it carried a different edge, not guilt, not grief, but warning. There was something deeper here, something she hadn't told them, something she wasn't ready to say out loud. Because the truth wasn't just about the cages. It was about why she had recognized the pattern of lights, why the convoy's trick had burned so familiar in her mind. She had seen it before, on the night her team died. And if that was true, then this wasn't a trap set for anyone. It was a message. For her. The sun slipped lower, shadows stretching long across the valley floor. She remained on the ridge, still as stone, the question echoing louder with every passing moment. What did they want from her? And why now? Her chest rose and fell in shallow beats, her hand curling tight against the rifle beside her. She didn't have the answer yet, but she knew one thing with haunting certainty. Silence wouldn't protect her this time. It would only bury her deeper. And she wasn't ready to vanish again. Not yet. Why did the base feel colder than the valley? She stepped off the transport, boots thudding against concrete, and for a moment she almost wished for the dust and silence of the ridge again. At least out there the fear was honest. Here, the fear lived in glances, sideways, sharp, pretending not to look but never letting her out of sight. The younger soldier walked ahead, helmet tucked beneath his arm, shoulders slumped as if the air itself pressed him down. Medics took him without words, guiding him toward the infirmary. He didn't resist, didn't even nod, just kept moving like a ghost pulled by invisible strings. She stood still, rifle still strapped across her back, hands loose at her sides. No one called her name. No one asked her for a report. She might as well have been another shadow clinging to the hangar walls. Inside the operations tent, the colonel's voice cut sharp through the thin walls, berating, demanding. Maps rustled. Radios spat static. She knew he was inside, tearing holes into every line of the mission, searching for someone to carry the blame. She turned away. She couldn't face him yet. Instead, she found herself walking the perimeter, past rows of barracks, the sharp smell of diesel, the thrum of generators. Soldiers lounged on crates, smoking in silence. Laughter clipped short as she passed. One man muttered something under his breath. She didn't catch it, but the bitterness was enough. Her chest tightened, but she didn't stop. She had no energy left for their suspicion. Not tonight. She ended up at the far edge of the base, where the floodlights died into darkness and the wire fence stood ragged against the sky. She crouched there, back against steel, pulling the rifle free and laying it across her knees. Her hands moved automatically, stripping it down piece by piece, cleaning, checking, restoring order in metal even as chaos spread in her chest. The motion soothed her, each click and slide familiar, unchanging. But her mind refused stillness. The convoy, the lights, the figure who had signaled in the dark. It wasn't coincidence, she knew that. She had seen the same coded blink years ago in the seconds before the blast took her team. It wasn't standard, it wasn't random, it was a signature. Someone was weaving threads through time, pulling her back to a night she tried to bury. Her fingers froze against the rifle bolt. She stared into the dark, breath slowing. If they were sending her a message, what did they expect her to do? Later in the barracks, sleep refused her. The bunks around her creaked with the restless weight of bodies, snores rising, boots thudding faintly as late shifts shuffled in. The smell of sweat and damp uniforms clung to the air. She lay on her back, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling. Each breath felt borrowed, shallow, carrying the weight of voices she couldn't silence. She saw again the older soldier's eyes, the way his lips formed words she couldn't hear. Finish it. She saw again the children's hands, small fingers clutching steel, eyes wide with desperate trust. And she saw the lights, blinking in rhythm like a heartbeat pulled from her past. Her stomach twisted. She turned onto her side, pressing her fists into the mattress. The others thought she was reckless. The colonel thought she was insubordinate. The boy thought she was a savior. But none of them knew the truth. That convoy wasn't an accident, it wasn't chance. It was bait, and she wasn't the one hunting. She was the one being called. The next morning the colonel summoned her. His office was bare except for maps nailed to the wall and a steel desk scarred with years of fists. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't even look up at first. "You cost us a man," he said flatly, eyes locked on papers in front of him. She didn't answer. "You disobeyed a direct order." His voice rose, sharp, cutting. "You put yourself and others at risk, again." Still, she didn't answer. Finally, he looked up, eyes hard, jaw clenched. "Why did you light the flare?" Her throat tightened. She thought of the cage, of the children's eyes. She thought of silence and what it had cost her once before. "Because if I hadn't," she said softly, "they'd still be locked inside." The colonel's stare sharpened. For a moment she thought he would erupt, slam his fist, strip her rank. But then his shoulders slumped the faintest inch, and he leaned back in his chair. "Do you think they'll remember you?" he asked quietly. "The kids, the civilians, do you think any of them will know your name, what it cost?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. He shook his head. "They won't. All they'll know is they're free, and all we'll know is that one of ours is." His words landed heavy, true, brutal, but not wrong. "Dismissed," he said finally, turning away. She left without saluting. That night she found the younger soldier sitting alone by the edge of the motor pool, a cigarette burning between his fingers. His face was hollow, skin pale under the yellow floodlights. She approached slowly, boots crunching against gravel. He didn't look up. "They gave me his tags," he murmured, pulling a chain from his pocket, the metal glinting. Said I should send them home, like I know what to write to his wife, his kids." His voice cracked. "How do you tell them he believed he'd come back?" She lowered herself beside him, silent stretching. The smoke curled sharp in the cold air. Finally she said, "You don't. You tell them he fought. You tell them he chose to protect." His hands trembled, clenching the tags tighter. "And if that's not enough?" Her eyes dropped to the ground. "It's never enough." For a moment his face twisted, anger, grief, confusion all colliding. But then he nodded, slow, defeated. They sat in silence, two shadows clinging to the same wound. Later in her bunk, she finally dreamed. The blast came again, heat, dirt, voices swallowed in thunder. She crawled through smoke, ears ringing, lungs clawing for air. She saw the blink of lights in the distance, mocking, rhythmic, the same cruel pattern. And then she saw him, the man from the ridge, standing just beyond the fire, untouched, calm. He lifted his hand, two fingers tapping his temple in a gesture too deliberate to be mistake. A signal, recognition. And she woke gasping, heart hammering, sweat chilling her skin. For a long time she sat in the dark, head in her hands. Because the dream wasn't dream, it was memory bleeding into now. And the message was clear. Whoever he was, he had been there then. And he was here now. The next day, when the colonel briefed them on fresh intel, another convoy, another trail disappearing into the mountains, her heart clenched. Because she knew before he finished speaking. It wasn't coincidence. It was the same pattern, the same game, drawing her deeper. She looked down at the map spread across the table, her finger tracing the line of the route. The air in the tent pressed heavy against her lungs. They thought they were chasing the enemy. But she knew the truth. The enemy was chasing her. And this time, she would have to decide whether to keep running or turn and face the shadow that refused to let her go. Why was her hand shaking? Not from fear, not entirely, more like recognition. The map on the briefing table wasn't just lines and symbols, it was memory inked in red. Valleys she had walked through before, roads she had bled on. And the colonel's voice, steady, forceful, was only background noise against the pounding in her skull. Intel confirms another convoy scheduled to move at dusk. Possible supplies, possible hostages. Same route, same markers. We intercept here, here, and here. His hand stabbed at the map, but her gaze froze on a small bend in the road where the inked trail hooked like a scar. That was where it happened before. That was where she lost them. And now it was happening again. She swallowed hard, keeping her face unreadable. But deep inside, a whisper coiled around her ribs. They're not moving supplies. They're moving you. The team shuffled out of the briefing tent, chatter hushed, weapons already clutched tighter. The younger soldier walked beside her, silent, jaw set. His eyes flicked toward her, waiting, searching for something she wouldn't give. She didn't speak until they were outside, until the desert wind cut through the heat and stung her eyes. "You don't have to come," she said softly. He stopped, stunned. "What do you mean?" "This isn't your fight." His voice cracked with disbelief. "We're a team." "No," her throat tightened. "This isn't about the mission, it's about me." He stared at her, anger rising, but beneath it, hurt. He shook his head. "You think you're the only one who lost someone out there. You think you're the only one carrying ghosts. If I stay behind, those ghosts win, and I'm not letting them." For the first time in days, she felt something break inside her, not weakness but recognition. He wasn't just young and reckless. He was her reflection. She looked away, voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't follow me, walk beside me." He nodded once, that was enough. At dusk, the convoy rolled out. Engines low, tires grinding against gravel, headlights swallowed in dim cloth coverings. The air smelled of dust and oil, acrid, heavy. Her heart beat in rhythm with the hum of the engine beneath her boots. The radio crackled with coded murmurs, the colonel's voice distant, clipped. But she wasn't listening. She was watching, waiting. Her eyes scanned the horizon, every shadow stretched too long, every flicker of light suspicious. She gripped her rifle tight, knuckles pale. And then there. 2 blinks, a pause, 2 more. Her blood turned to ice. The same signal. She pressed her lips tight, forcing breath steady, but her hands trembled on the weapon. She could almost feel the desert mocking her. You came back, just like I knew you would. The ambush came sudden, vicious. Gunfire split the silence, sharp and deafening. Dust exploded into the air, swallowing headlights. The convoy scattered, soldiers diving for cover, shouts rising and dying in the storm of bullets. She rolled behind a steel barrier, breath ragged, ears ringing. The younger soldier dropped beside her, eyes wide, firing blindly into the shadows. They knew we were coming, he shouted over the chaos. Of course they did, she knew it before he said it. This wasn't their trap, it was hers. She raised her scope, scanning through the storm. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like lightning, but beyond them, she saw him. A silhouette on the ridge, calm, watching, not firing, just waiting. Her chest constricted, she knew that posture, she knew the stillness, the patience. Years hadn't erased it, he was the same. The man from her past, the man she swore was dead. Her finger hovered on the trigger, but she couldn't pull it. Not yet. Because if she killed him now, she'd never know why. The firefight dragged on, minutes stretching into eternity. The younger soldier's breathing grew ragged, panic lacing every shot. She grabbed his wrist, forcing the rifle down. Listen to me, she hissed. Stop firing, conserve, breathe. His chest heaved, sweat dripping into his eyes, but he nodded, grounding himself in her voice. She kept her hand firm on his shoulder, steady, anchoring him while her own heart threatened to tear itself apart. Because the figure on the ridge was gone. Vanished into the smoke, just like before. When the gunfire finally faded, when the dust settled and silence returned, the convoy was wrecked. One vehicle burned, black smoke twisting into the sky. The wounded groaned, medics rushing with stretchers. The colonel's voice screamed through the radio, demanding reports, demanding numbers. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the ridge, alone. Her boots sank into loose gravel, every step heavier than the last. The air was sharp, acrid, burned with cordite. She scanned the ground, searching for tracks, for proof that she hadn't imagined him. And there it was. A print heavy, deliberate, and beside it, a small piece of cloth torn, caught on a rock. She picked it up, fingers trembling. The fabric was old, weathered, but the mark on it was clear. The same insignia her team once carried, the team that never made it home. Her chest hollowed, her pulse thundered. Because this wasn't just an enemy. It was one of theirs. That night she couldn't breathe. Every wall in the barracks closed in, every voice felt too close. She slipped outside, rifle across her back, the night air cold against her sweat-soaked skin. She stood beneath the floodlights, staring at the cloth in her hand, gripping it so tight her knuckles whitened. The memories came flooding, faces of men who trusted, who followed, who died, and one face in particular, a face she buried. But he wasn't buried, he was here, alive, and sending her signals. Why? To punish, to warn, to recruit. She closed her eyes, heart heavy. Whatever it wasn't finished. And this time, she wouldn't wait for the message to come to her. This time, she would hunt it down. The next morning, when the colonel tried to debrief, she said nothing. She let him rant, slam fists, curse her name. She didn't argue, didn't explain. Because she wasn't planning on asking permission anymore. She was planning on disappearing into the shadows, just like before. And if she came back, she wouldn't come empty-handed. She would carry the truth. Or nothing at all. Why did the dawn feel heavier than night? The base was alive with noise, boots pounding gravel, engines roaring, voices clipped and angry. But beneath it all she moved silent, almost invisible. The cloth scrap was folded in her pocket, its weight like a second heartbeat. Every step she took toward the fence was a betrayal, and yet every step felt inevitable. She paused near the shadow of a fuel truck, watching the guard tower. Two soldiers inside, one leaning on a rifle, the other sipping from a tin cup. Their eyes swept lazily across the perimeter, careless in routine. She crouched low, breath steady, pulse measured. One more scan, a shift of shadow, then she was moving. Boots on dirt, body tucked close to the earth. The fence loomed ahead, coils of wire sharp against the pale sky. She pulled the cutters from her pack, metal biting metal in tiny, muffled clicks. A single breath. Two. And then the gap was wide enough. She slipped through, careful not to snag, careful not to leave a trace. Beyond the fence, the desert stretched vast and indifferent, waiting. She was gone. The mountains welcomed her like an old enemy, their ridges carved against the horizon, jagged and unforgiving. The air was thinner here, colder, every gust carrying whispers of sand and stone. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate, boots crunching in rhythm with her breath. But inside, nothing was steady. She kept seeing his face. Not clearly, not fully, but the outline, the posture, the certainty of recognition. The figure on the ridge, the figure from her nightmares. A man she once called brother. A man she once buried in silence. Her throat burned with the memory of his laugh, sharp and sudden, echoing in cramped barracks after long patrols. She remembered the way he shouldered more weight than anyone, the way he promised, "We'll all get home." And yet he hadn't. Until now. Her stomach twisted. She didn't know if she wanted to find him, or if she wanted the desert to swallow her before she did. By midday she found tracks, fresh ones, heavy boots pressed into the dust, deeper than her own, leading toward the spine of the ridge. She crouched, fingers brushing the edges, the warmth of the sun still caught in the impression. He was close. She adjusted the rifle strap across her chest, eyes narrowing against the glare. Her breath slowed, training sharpening into instinct. Every sound became sharper, the whistle of wind, the rattle of pebbles. She moved slower now, a shadow against stone. The path wound higher, steeper. Twice she froze, dropping flat, convinced she'd seen movement above. But nothing followed, only silence. Still she knew, she wasn't the only one hunting. That night she built no fire. She ate in silence, the rations dry against her tongue, water lukewarm from the canteen. She sat against the rock, rifle balanced across her lap, eyes fixed on the valley below. The stars spread wide above, cold and indifferent. She used to find comfort in them, back when the sky meant home was under the same light. Now they only reminded her how small she was, how far. Sleep teased her, pulling at the edges of her exhaustion. But every time her eyes closed, she saw the convoy. The children's hands on the bars. The man on the ridge tapping his temple, a signal meant for her. Why me, she thought, why now? The wind carried no answer. At dawn, gunfire cracked the silence. She hit the ground, rolling behind a rock, heart hammering. Bullets sparked stone inches from her head. She raised the rifle, scanning through the scope. Nothing, just empty ridges, jagged and unmoving. Another shot closer. She shifted, crawling low, scanning every angle. And then she saw it. Not a muzzle flash, not a shadow, but a small mirror high on the ridge catching the sun and blinking. Once, twice. Her breath caught, not an attack, a signal. Her chest tightened, fury rising hot and sudden. He was toying with her, leading her. She slammed the scope shut, shoving the rifle across her back. No more waiting, no more watching. She started climbing. The ridge cut into her palms, stone scraping raw skin, dust filling her throat. She climbed harder, faster, chasing the phantom signal. Her lungs burned, legs screaming, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Every scrape of her boots was a curse, every pull of her hands a memory clawing back to life. She could almost hear him laughing, mocking, daring. When she reached the top, her chest heaved, sweat slicking her face. She scanned the flat stretch of rock, rifle ready. Empty. Only silence, only wind. Her hands shook on the weapon, rage and despair twisting together. She screamed into the emptiness, voice tearing from her throat. Show yourself. Her cry echoed off stone, fading into the valley. And then a voice, calm, familiar, behind her. You still hesitate. Her heart stopped. She turned slow, every muscle taut, every nerve alight. And there he was. Alive. Older, harder, but unmistakable. The ghost she buried, the brother she lost. Standing in the shadows, watching her. She raised the rifle, but her arms shook. Her breath trembled, her finger frozen on the trigger. You should be dead, she whispered. He tilted his head, faint smile sharp as glass. Maybe I am. The silence between them cut deeper than any bullet. Because in that moment, she realized the truth. She hadn't come here to kill him. She had come here to understand why he never died. And why he chose now, of all times, to return. Why did his eyes look older than his face? She held the rifle steady, but inside she was unraveling. The man before her was flesh and breath, not shadow. Lines carved deeper into his skin, hair streaked with gray, but the posture, unshaken, unbroken, was the same. Her voice cracked. You left us, you let them die. He didn't flinch. I survived. The words dropped heavy between them, colder than the wind. She wanted to pull the trigger, wanted the recoil to erase him, to erase years of silence and guilt, but her finger wouldn't move. Because she needed to know. Why? She demanded, the word tearing from her throat. For a long moment he said nothing. His gaze drifted past her, toward the valley below where the convoy smoldered in memory. Then he spoke, calm as if rehearsed. Because I saw what we were fighting for, and it wasn't worth dying. Her chest tightened. That's it, that's your reason. No, his voice hardened. That's the truth you've been running from. You still think this is about honor, about duty, but you don't see the game. We're pawns, disposable, and I refuse to be thrown away. She shook her head, fury rising. So you betrayed us, your own team. I saved myself. His jaw tightened. And I've done more for survival than you could stomach. Her stomach turned, bile burning her throat. She wanted to scream, to curse him, but he stepped closer, and his voice dropped low, almost gentle. You think you're strong because you stay, because you obey. Look at you, haunted, broken, chasing ghosts. They'll bury you too. And for what? A name on a wall no one remembers. Her hands shook on the rifle, but her voice steadied. Better a name on a wall than a stain in the dirt. For the first time his mask cracked. His eyes flashed anger, maybe sorrow. It vanished quick, but she saw it. They circled each other, the silence alive with what neither dared say. Finally he stopped. His tone shifted, darker, urgent. You're not here by accident. You followed because I let you, because there's something you need to see. Her chest clenched. Another trick. No, he pulled something from his vest, tossing it at her feet. A small drive, scratched, dented. Proof. She didn't move. What is it? Files, orders, transmissions, everything they never told us, everything they used us for. I've been gathering it for years, watching, waiting. Her breath quickened. The weight of the scrap cloth in her pocket suddenly felt heavier. You expect me to believe this? I expect you to survive, he said coldly. With this, you'll see the truth. Without it, you'll keep chasing shadows until you join them. Her heart pounded. She wanted to kick it away, wanted to burn it, wanted to make it disappear. Because if it was true, everything she bled for was a lie. And if it was, then he was just the ghost she should have killed already. The younger soldier's voice echoed in her head. You think you're the only one carrying ghosts. She crouched slowly, picked up the drive, holding it like poison. Her hand trembled, but her eyes stayed locked on him. What do you want from me? His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I want you to stop pretending, to stop dying for them, to choose yourself. Her stomach twisted, and join you. He didn't answer, he didn't have to. The silence stretched, thick, unbearable. Finally she whispered, if I take this, they'll call me traitor. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across hers. Or maybe they'll finally call you free. The wind rose, sharp against her face, filling the silence they couldn't. Her grip on the rifle tightened, then loosened, then tightened again. She could feel two futures pressing against her chest. One where she pulled the trigger and ended him, one where she walked away carrying the weight of his truth. Neither felt like survival. Her throat burned, her eyes stung. Why me? She asked at last, voice raw. He tilted his head, studying her like she was the puzzle, and when he spoke it wasn't cold, it was almost tender. Because you were the only one who hesitated. Her heart stopped. The ambush, the flare, the children, the way she always paused, always carried the cost. He saw in her what he once was, and he hated her for it. Or maybe he needed her for it. The moment shattered when a crack of gunfire split the ridge. A bullet whined past, slamming stone. She dove instinctively, rolling hard. He was already moving, vanishing into the jagged rock. 1 second there, the next gone, swallowed by shadows. Dust stung her lungs, her ears ringing with echoes. When the silence returned, she was alone again. The drive was still in her hand, cold and heavy. And in her chest, a war raged louder than the firefight. Kill him and the ghosts would rest. Follow him and the ghosts would never forgive. But the truth, whatever it was now hers to carry. She descended the ridge under a bruised sky, every step weighted. In her pocket the drive burned like a brand. In her mind his voice whispered, insistent. Stop dying for them, choose yourself. But when she reached the valley, when she saw the broken convoy and the soldiers tending their wounded, she felt the younger soldier's eyes find hers, searching, hopping. And she realized she wasn't choosing only for herself. She never had. The weight of that truth pressed heavier than any rifle, heavier than any war. And the question burned inside her. Could she carry both, her ghosts and his truth, without losing herself completely? Why did silence feel louder than war? The drive burned in her pocket as though it had a pulse of its own. Back at base, the colonel's voice cut sharp through radios, demanding answers, demanding order. Medics still tended to the wounded, the smell of antiseptic and diesel mixing into the air. Soldiers moved like ghosts, each carrying their own small grief. And she stood in the middle of it all, unseen, unspoken, carrying a weight no one else knew. The younger soldier found her near the motor pool. His face was pale, hollow, but his eyes clung to her with stubborn hope. Did you find him? His voice cracked on the last word. She hesitated. The desert wind rattled loose tarps, filling the pause. Finally, she shook her head. No, not the way I thought. His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. He only searched her eyes as if the truth was written there. She looked away. Because if she told him everything, she would shatter him. And if she told him nothing, she would shatter herself. That night she sat alone in the dim barracks, the drive in her hand. The metal was cold, sharp against her skin. With one press she could open it. With one choice she could know. But knowledge wasn't free. Knowledge never was. She thought of the colonel's words, "Do you think they'll remember you?" She thought of the children's eyes, desperate and trusting. She thought of his voice on the ridge, "Or maybe they'll finally call you free." Her hands shook, her chest ached. And she realized this wasn't about choosing sides. It wasn't about him or the colonel, about betrayal or duty. It was about deciding which ghost she could live with. The younger soldier sat with her the next morning, silence stretching between them. He fiddled with the dog tags in his hand, eyes fixed on the ground. Finally, he whispered, "I had a dream last night. I saw him. The one we lost. He was laughing like nothing ever happened." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what it means," he admitted, his voice cracked. "But I think he'd want us to keep going, not looking back." She swallowed hard, fingers curling around the drive in her pocket. She wanted to tell him she had seen the same ghost, only not laughing, not free. She wanted to tell him that some ghosts never let you go. But instead she said, "Then we keep going." His shoulders eased just slightly. It was enough. At dusk, she walked to the edge of the base, the desert stretching endless before her. The sky bled orange and crimson, shadows long and unforgiving. She pulled the drive from her pocket, holding it against the dying light. Her reflection shone faintly in the metal, tired eyes lined with dust, lips pressed thin. She could open it, expose it, burn every name, every order, every lie into the world. She could bury it, lose it in the sand where no one would ever find it. Or she could do nothing, carry it, let it weigh her down until the end. The wind pressed against her, sharp and cold. Slowly she closed her fist around the drive, and then, with a breath that shook her chest, she slipped it back into her pocket. Not destroyed, not revealed. Carried. Because some truths weren't meant for the world. Some were meant only for the ones strong enough to bear them. She returned to the barracks where the younger soldier slept at last, exhaustion finally claiming him. She sat on her bunk, boots still dusty, rifle still strapped across her back. Her body ached, her mind churned, but her chest felt steady for the first time in weeks. Because she had chosen, not for him, not for the colonel, for herself. In the days that followed, missions continued. Convoys rolled, radios crackled, names were called, orders barked. The war moved on, indifferent, endless. And she moved with it. But now, when she looked across the valley, when she saw the ridges where shadows lingered, she didn't see only ghosts. She saw herself, still standing, still carrying. Not broken, not free, something in between. On a quiet night, long after the camp had settled, she found herself staring at the stars again. The same stars she once cursed for their indifference. This time, she let the silence fill her without resistance. And in that silence, she understood. Dignity doesn't shout, doesn't plead, doesn't demand recognition. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts. She lay back on the hard cot, eyes closing, the drive still heavy in her pocket. And as the desert wind whispered through the wires of the base, she let it carry her final thought into the night. Some burdens aren't meant to be lifted. They're meant to be carried, so others don't have to.